parents lied about a medical emergency to steal my $15,000 wedding fund to fund Golden Child's honeymoon, so I married in secret and bankrupted them. Of our money being wasted by paying for the lawyer because we would probably not even be able to prove anything since we didn't even have texts in our favor. Everything had been verbal and off the record. So as much as we wanted to go after my parents, we decided not to because it would be pointless and we didn't want to waste more of our money on a hopeless situation. Instead, we decided to start thinking about how we were going to change our wedding plans. Thankfully, my husband's family came to the rescue after they found out about what my parents had done, and his aunt offered to let us use her farmhouse venue for free. We had always been very keen on the idea of a beach wedding right from the beginning, so his aunt hadn't suggested it at first. But now that we were looking at other places, she made that suggestion and I decided to check the place out. My husband had already seen the place before, but when I first walked into the venue, I just knew that this was it. It was a beautiful place, and even though it wasn't anywhere near the beach, my husband and I were content with it. His aunt was letting us use the venue for free, so it was all the more reason for us to go ahead and start planning around the farmhouse instead. I got busy with the wedding planning and it gave me more of a reason to cut my parents off. I had already made up my mind that they were not going to be invited to my wedding, but I had been on the fence about my brother. Because he hadn't exactly done anything wrong since he didn't know that my parents had borrowed the money from me to give it to him. But he made the decision much easier for me by calling me up once he was back from his honeymoon and tearing into me about humiliating our parents by asking them to return my money. He told me that he had heard about whatever had happened from our mother and he was very upset that I was being so difficult about this. Apparently, he believed that this was just no big deal even though he was the one who spent my money. And said that as soon as he could, he would return it to me, but I just had to suck it up before the wedding and scale down. So that's when I made up my mind about him as well, and after that, I didn't speak to either of them. Now that I didn't have the entirety of my wedding fund, I couldn't spend money blindly and have a luxurious fancy wedding. Honestly, I think that worked for me because the wedding that I did have was a lot more beautiful than anything that I had in mind earlier. We had to scale down, but it was worth it because after a while, we realized that this day was supposed to be about us, and in our daily lives, we were not the kind of people that we were trying to portray ourselves as. So it would be pretty shallow if we went out of our way to spend a bomb on a fancy wedding just to impress people. And we decided that we were going to cut down on the cost of the wedding and instead, do something better with the money that we had saved afterwards. In a way, I'm thankful for the way that things worked out because my wedding was still really beautiful and dreamy, but it had none of the pomp and show that I had in mind earlier, and it was really a good thing. Because we were only surrounded by the people who we loved and who loved us to celebrate our coming together. I think that's pretty much all you need for a wedding. So I'm pretty happy with how things turned out, and I posted the photos of my wedding a couple of days ago. Everyone from my family who had been invited to the wedding had been given very strict and specific instructions to make sure that my parents and my brother didn't get to know that the invitations had already been sent out. Because then they would throw a tantrum since they didn't get one. And that's how we managed to have a private ceremony without them showing up or trying to bully me into inviting them before the wedding. But now that that was over and everything had gone smoothly, I didn't see anything wrong about posting the photos on social media. However, they got to see it somehow and contacted me the very next day to demand an explanation as to why they had not been invited to my wedding. I thought that it was pretty surprising that they even expected to be invited because the last conversation that I had with any of them hadn't been a pleasant one. I had been crying when I left my parents' house after our last fight, and we hadn't spoken to each other since. And the last time that I spoke to my brother, he made me feel like this was all my fault and I was the one who was being dramatic. After that, I hadn't spoken to any of them and they hadn't tried to talk to me either, so I didn't know why they had even expected to be invited. Not only had they expected that I was going to invite them, but they were upset that they were not present at the wedding. My parents were the ones who called me and then added my brother to the phone call so that all of them could yell at me at once. But I didn't care for it and I found it to be very entitled of them. I had already cut them out of my life and I didn't need this drama while I was trying to enjoy my life as a newlywed. So I told them that after they had stolen money from me, I had to cut down on the cost of the wedding. So I decided only to invite family and a couple of close friends, and since they were neither, they didn't make the list. After that I hung up and blocked them, hoping that they would leave me alone now. But an hour after that phone call, my husband told me that my brother had reached out to him so he could inform us that my parents had been really insulted by what I had said. My mother was devastated, so she kept crying and almost fainted because she was crying so hard. That's all that he said, but I started feeling guilty because I didn't mean to hurt my parents that badly. He might be bluffing, but I don't know for sure, and it's making me feel weirdly bad ever since I heard Ida for not inviting my parents and my brother to my wedding because they stole money from my wedding fund. Update 1. Hi. So it's been a week since I had that last conversation with my parents, and my brother and I have decided that I am not going to speak to them again. My mother can cry as much as she wants to, but it's not going to change the facts. I had been crying really hard the day that I had confronted them about the money and had even begged them to return it to me before the wedding, but they didn't seem to care about that. They had taken it really lightly, and so now I was going to do the same to them. You reap what you sow. I also told my brother never to contact me or my husband. Especially my husband, because he had nothing to do with any of this and I didn't want my family to bother him with their petty antics. And then had blocked him again after that text because I didn't want my family to have any access to me. They had treated me badly all my life, but now I was not going to take that anymore. I swear if I had a way then I would even file a lawsuit against them and get my money back, but that might be a bit of a long shot right now since we don't have any tangible evidence. My husband thinks that it is worth a try and it might just work, so we've been considering it. He has been in talks with a reputed lawyer, and in a couple of days we are going to make a decision about what to do. Until then, I just have to think of a way to make them confess or admit to the fact that they had borrowed the money from me under the pretext of using it for a medical emergency, but then they had given it away to my brother so he could have a fun honeymoon. It's going to be difficult to prove it in court, but I don't want to let them off the hook so easily. I deserve to get my money back, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure that they return it to me, and they return it to me soon enough. Update 2. Yesterday, I told my brother not to bother my husband with our family drama. So he obviously took it as a sign to drag him into this, even though it doesn't involve him. After we got back from work, my husband told me that my parents and my brother had sent him a bunch of texts and demanded that he speak to me and tell me to unblock them. When he blocked them, they decided to take it a level higher and actually showed up at his workplace. Apparently, they had been waiting for him right outside, and as soon as they saw his car leaving the place, they started tailing him and honking at him repeatedly. So he had to pull over and wait for them to catch up because he could recognize my brother's car and knew that it was them. He also knew that if he didn't stop and wait for them, then they would just follow him home, and that would really bother me, so he decided to take one for the team and entertain their BS. When he pulled over, my brother left his car, walked up to his window, and said that they wanted to speak to him in person. There was a diner nearby and my husband just wanted to get it over with. They took a booth in the diner so my family could say whatever it was that they believed was so important. My brother told him that he believed that it wasn't fair for me to cut everyone off over some money and thought that it was a bit of an overreaction. They also thought that my implying that we were not family anymore just because they had borrowed money from me was taking things too far. I had already blocked them so they couldn't reach out to me, but they knew that if my husband tried to speak to me then I might just hear him out. So they were trying to appeal to him, and then my husband could remind me that we were a family no matter what. So I needed to act like it, instead of throwing tantrums over every little misunderstanding and acting like a brat. My parents also said that they were going to return the money to me eventually, but it was just not possible for them to give it back to me all at once. And they had already explained it to me like a million times, so I needed to be more thoughtful because my brother was struggling at work and my parents were about to retire in a couple of years. They were trying to convince my husband that this was all my fault and I was acting out for no reason. But my husband played it really well, and instead of putting them in their place, he actually entertained and made them feel like he was on their side. He told them that he could try and explain this to me, but it would help a lot more if they reached out to me personally as well and sent a heartfelt message to me. So far they had only been taking an accusatory tone with me, but my husband convinced them that if they acknowledged their mistakes, then that might calm me down, and those idiots actually bought it. My husband manipulated them into sending me a message where they acknowledged what they had done and made them believe that might make me go easy on them, and I would end up apologizing to them because tone was everything. It's all a lot of baloney, of course, because as soon as they send that message, we are using that as an admission of guilt and going after them legally. I am actually really proud of my husband because he dealt with this much better than I would have. And I think he's an evil genius, but he's my evil genius, so I love him. Update 3. Well, my husband's plan worked and we are so pumped right now. My parents and my brother, like a bunch of idiots, sent me an email detailing every single lie that they had told and confessing to whatever they had done. So now that we have proof, my husband has given our lawyer the green light to go ahead with the petition, and soon enough, we will be getting our money back. $15,000 might not be a lot to a lot of people, but to me, it means a lot because I spent the last 5 years trying to save up for the future and I worked really hard to get where I am today. It took a lot of late nights and sacrifices, and I'm not about to let it all go in vain just because my brother is lazy and my parents want to enable him. So we will be suing them, and no matter what it takes, we will absolutely be getting my money back. We have also started planning for our honeymoon, and it's going to be a short trip to the beach again because that's where this all started, and it's always going to be a special place for us. We might take a longer break in a couple of months and make an actual vacation out of it, but until then this is going to have to be done. We realize that we don't have to impress people and spend a ton of money. We can just do whatever makes us happy, and so we are doing exactly that. Also, because I don't want to be like my brother, who posted a bunch of photos from his honeymoon after they returned to rub it in people's faces, but now, he is going to be sued just for that. It's really sad for them, but they brought it onto themselves, and now, they totally deserve whatever is going to come to them.